SNAP card in your pocket? Show of hands. What? None of you? None of you? Why is that?
Don't need it.
No, that's not the reason.
You'd feel bad.
Because you don't qualify. That's the only reason. I guarantee you, if there wasn't a means test, you'd all have a SNAP card. Just like at my age, when you turn 65, everybody has a Medicare card. Medicaid. Not Medicaid, but Medicare. I have a Medicare card. I have a Social Security card. Do I need $3,000 a month in Social Security payments? Which I have earned, right? But I don't really need it. You see, the W is being violated with Social Security and Medicare. Because it's given out to everybody, whether you need it or not. So you and I are paying for Bill Gates' medical expenses. When I met Warren Buffett several years ago, I said, Warren, do you have a Social Security card? Yes, I do. Do you need it? No, I don't. Social Security, do you need that $3,000 a month? No, I don't. So if we wanted to really solve, and there's an unfunded liability problem that is getting worse and worse, if you want to really solve that problem, it should have been means tested right from the beginning, because the original intent of Social Security was to help, just help people who couldn't survive on their own. And I don't see anything necessarily wrong with that. But when you have everybody qualifying, this is the problem with the universal income plan, where everybody gets $10,000. Have you heard about this? So this is an advocacy by a number of Democratic socialists. Let's give everybody $10,000 a year. That'll give them free time to seek a job. It's all going to be really helpful. They can get off welfare, possibly, so forth. Well, what's wrong with that? What does that violate? What principle here? Definitely the W. To some extent, the accountability as well. But you're giving people I'm getting 10,000. You're getting 10,000. Everybody gets 10,000. I'm getting $10,000 whether you want it or not. It's a violation of the welfare principle. And when you tell socialists, do you really think you should be giving $10,000 to these rich people? That's when they say, oh, yeah, maybe not. You win a debate there. So after explaining this in my class, we bring out the A&W root beer. Everybody gets an A&W root beer, and we toast the A&W principle. Just the right combination of A&W. I don't know what A&W is, probably the founders or something, but it's really fun to pass this around. Students never forget it. We could have done it today, but we didn't think of it. But it's really a fun exercise. I've given talks on this to legislators, and they really get it right away, that you don't want to be too generous in your W. That's a real danger, because that's where you really cause inflation and deficits and so forth by violating the welfare principle. And if the welfare principle is too generous, you destroy the A, accountability. So you have this tension between A and W. You've got to have the right balance. But it's very appealing. I found explaining this to socialists, they really like it. Because if you don't have the W and you just talk about A, you talk to them, you're blue in the face, and they don't recognize the need to help others. This is a way of identifying and solving this problem. So now I want to introduce democratic capitalism. And the best example I can give you is the $5 a day story by Henry Ford. Since you're all from Michigan, right? Been told.
A few are.
How many from Michigan here? Oh, we got a few people, I said. So, I mean, Henry Ford is the famous citizen of Michigan, of Detroit. And everybody needs to know the story of the $5 a day story. How many have heard of the Henry Ford $5 a day story? Okay, a few of you. It is a historic event in democratic capitalism. In many ways, I would call Henry Ford the father of democratic capitalism. Not Andrew Carnegie, who said that capitalism is turning luxuries into necessities. So he was a big fan of democratic consumerism, but not democratic capitalism. Because when he was making record profits, he never shared those profits with his workers. His attitude was, whatever we can get away with and give them the minimum and have them work hard, the better. And at the Homestake mine, that's a famous story there where he negotiated with the union, the steel workers at the Homestake mine, or the Homestead mine, sorry. And there, the union negotiated a 12 hours down to 8-hour day. And that was great. The union said, wow, fantastic. We can now spend time with our family. We don't have to be at work all the time and then come home exhausted and go straight to bed. So this was a real win for everybody, and it increased productivity and so forth. Well, a year later, Andrew Carnegie reneged on this. Said, no, we're going to go back to 12 hours a day. Well, you can imagine how the workers felt, and they went on strike. And they brought in the Pinkertons, and you had a bloodbath. So that was anything but democratic capitalism. That was the standard labor versus capital debate that the socialists and the communists got a lot of traction with union people because of that. So what did Henry Ford do? Well, Henry Ford had a record profit with Ford Motor Company in 1914. He made $30 million, which was a lot of money back then. It was record profits. So he called in his board members and he said, board members, we have record profits. Fantastic. Okay? Pretend you guys are all board members. Yeah. Okay. So here's the exciting part, guys. Gals? No, it's only guys. There were no women in the board room, but let's presume women were part of it, okay? Now listen, what can we do with that $30 million? There's 3 things we can do, and I want you to vote on each one. Number 1 is, let's keep all the $30 million and expand the factories, open up more factories, Ford, to build the Model Ts elsewhere. Let's improve our production, our assembly line. Let's reinvest the entire $30 million. All in favor, raise your hand. Okay. All in favor, raise your hand. Okay, every hand went up. Some of you are skeptical, but that's because you're 100 years later, right? Okay, so number 2, Henry Ford said number 2 is, listen, we have a lot of long-suffering investors. Many of you have invested with the company 10 years ago and you haven't been paid. No dividends. How about we declare a dividend and give investors what they've long waited for, a return on their investment? All in favor, raise your hand. Now, every hand goes up. They said, yeah, we've been waiting a long time. Okay? Number 3. Most controversial. We got a lot of workers out there who built these automobiles. How about giving them a raise? All in favor, raise your hand. 21st century, folks. Yeah, you would favor that, right? But the board, of course, not a single hand went up. Henry Ford turned to his accountant and said, Ted, how much money would we have left if we go from $2 a day to $3 a day? calculates and so on. Well, Mr. Ford, your profit margin dropped. Instead of 30 million, you're down to 28 million. Oh, okay. What if we raise it to $4 a day? And he figured out, well, you lose another 2 million and you're down to 26 million. And he said, so what do you all think? And of course, they were all very much opposed to this. And finally, after an hour debate, Henry Ford said, enough, $5 a day starting tomorrow. Made the headlines all around the country. It was an absolute brilliant move. And what happened to these workers? First of all, how many people showed up for work the next day? How many called in sick? None. You know, the whole problem of productivity was changed overnight. All the workers became much more productive. Also, how many people lined up to apply for a job at Ford Motor Company afterwards? There are pictures. Thousands of people lining up to apply to the Ford Motor Company. Now, the Marxists make two arguments against capitalism. Karl Marx says capitalism exploits the worker. You make all these profits and you don't give any of it back to the workers. Second, alienation. You alienate workers. They're there doing assembly line work and it's monotonous, and besides that, they're producing products they can't even use themselves. They could not afford, Ford workers could not afford the Model T. So in one fell swoop, Henry Ford solved both those arguments. Exploitation, no. He's sharing the profits with workers. Nobody had ever done that before. And number two, they finally could afford the cars that they were making. That made a huge difference. It was a huge publicity success. It was a huge profit. They made record profits again the following year. Really fantastic. So I paid homage. I went to the Highland Park. Highland Park is where the Model Ts were made, the Ford factory. And sadly, it is an abandoned, empty building. But they do have a sign out there saying 1 million cars, Model Ts, were made here. It's pretty cool. So this is really important. So how can we apply the Henry Ford example of democratic capitalism today? By the way, unions did not create weekends, 8-hour workdays, a living wage, 5-day, 40-hour work week. Henry Ford did in 1926. So that's pretty interesting. So these are the two arguments against Marxism. And to this day, the Marxists call this Fordism, and it's not a term they are endeared to, Fordism. So modern day examples of democratic capitalism making workers wealthy. Microsoft has made 12,000 employees. Employees, not investors, employees, millionaires. Not by paying them a huge salary, but by giving all of them stock options. Microsoft just hit a record high today, $142 a share. All Microsoft employees qualify for stock options. Home Depot has made 3,000 employee millionaires through stock options. Now you can do profit sharing as well, but stock options are the biggest leveraged approach. And of course they're only available, private companies will do stock options as well. You just have to, Coke Industries has an option program, but it's very much geared to your own contribution to the program. But this is making millionaires. Do you think there's a lot of socialists working for Microsoft after something like this happens? There are a few, but not a lot. Home Depot. Founder of Home Depot wrote a book, I Love Capitalism. And that's why. And others. This is infectious, isn't it? To this kind of program of sharing the wealth. The biggest difference between capitalism and socialism is that under socialism, you share the poverty. Under capitalism, you share the wealth, and the wealth can continue to grow with stock option type programs. We need to sell this more, this concept, not just worker ownership. I mean, in a sense, indirectly, there's worker ownership because they become investors. But they have skin in the game. That's the whole plan. And if you give stock options according to their contribution, and to their deeds, then you have the proper incentives to keep the system alive and keep it going. So this is really critical. And this is known as the stakeholder philosophy. It's not the shareholder philosophy. It's the stakeholder philosophy where you benefit all stakeholders. And who are the stakeholders? They're the executives and the CEOs, but it's also the investors and it's also the workers called team members. There's all kinds of phrases now used to suggest working together. It's suppliers, it's the community. And believe it or not, some of the biggest corporations treat the government not as the enemy, but as an ally to work together with. It's kind of an interesting phenomenon. I spent an hour with Charles Koch, Koch Industries, and I happened to mention I made some disparaging remark about the IRS, and he says, they're one of our partners. Partners? I said, Charles, what do you mean partner? Yes, they're one of our partners. We work with them to make sure they get a fair share, and they don't. And as a result, they don't go after us like they go after Donald Trump. So, and the EPA used to fine Koch Industries millions and millions of dollars. And then Charles Koch finally said, this is not working. We must make the EPA a partner. And they did this, and now they win awards. And they have record profits. So this is a mindset change by business. Most businesses have a Kevin O'Leary approach, which is the only purpose of money is to make money. If you want a friend, buy a dog. That's his approach. But John Mackey, the CEO of Whole Foods Markets, who's written an excellent book called Conscious Capitalism, has developed this new model, the stakeholder philosophy. Now, it's not perfect. Look, when you have a downturn, you got to lay people off. And the CEO isn't going to lay himself off unless he's responsible for the collapse. So there are some inequities that are inevitable in this kind of a business. But if you retain your profits and don't pay it all out in dividends, retained earnings are extremely important. So Harris Rosen is one of my favorite examples. Harris Rosen runs Rosen Hotels and Rosen Resorts in Orlando. Probably haven't heard of him because he's small compared to Universal and Disneyland. But in 2008, during the financial crisis, or right before the financial crisis, everything was great. Everybody was going to Orlando. The hotel occupancy rates were 90% plus, but then the Great Recession hit, the financial crisis hit. People stopped going to Disneyland and Universal, and they stopped coming to the Harris Rosen resorts and hotels. So, what did Harris Rosen do? Well, we know what Disney did. They laid off workers. They know what Universal did. They laid off workers. Harris Rosen said, no, these are family. We don't lay them off, but we will change their work. They're not going to be cleaning rooms now, but we are going to spend time upgrading our hotels because we know that in a couple of years, the customers will return. We know that. We have faith in capitalism. We have great faith that this capitalist system will recover. And when they do, we'll be ready. But you have to have retained earnings. You've got to have money in the bank to keep these people employed. Now, he did do real good bargains with construction work people who were desperate for work at that time, so he cut some really good deals. But you still got to have money to pay them. Where'd that money come from? Where did Harris Rosen get that money? Was he just a fat cat that just had a ton of money that he inherited? No, he was dirt poor when he started his business. No, he had retained earnings. He had $300 million in the bank that he didn't pay out in dividends. He kept that money back for a rainy day. It's called a rainy day fund. And that's how you do it. That's modern monetary theory that works. So companies have a lot of cash. Microsoft has $100 billion in cash. Did you know that? $100 billion they're sitting on. And you say to yourself, well, that is really stupid. But is it? Is it? Could we have another financial crisis in this country? If you study Austrian economics, you know that it could happen. We have this huge debt of $21 trillion, keep growing because there's irresponsible players in this market. So good companies have retained earnings, they have stock options, they treat their employees as best they can, maybe not family. Harris Rosen could do this. He had 100, 200 employees. I mean, Microsoft has thousands of employees, so maybe it doesn't work in every case. But you can see this positive formula for success called democratic capitalism. And you got to emphasize the democratic. If you just say capitalism, you're going to get all these negative feelings about capitalism being exploitive and fraudulent and bad business practice. But when you say democratic capitalism, you're making a real statement there that's really positive. So I love this other cartoon. They just run out of money. The biggest problem with the socialists is they run out of money. And so the only thing they can rely on is tax the hell out of these people. But if you tax them too much, the golden goose can't lay any eggs. Really dangerous. So you want to have the right balance, and I think the A&W principle does it. I think stock options do it. Retained earnings are important. Balance. Benjamin Franklin said the 3 grand principles of success in life. There's 3 grand principles, in case you want to write these down. Okay? Industry, thrift, and prudence. Industry, thrift, and prudence. Extremely important. Do you work hard? You need to work hard to be successful in life. Thrift means you live within your budget, retained earnings, whether you're an individual, you save money, you don't overdo your expenditures, you buy used and not new. There's lots of ways to do this. You have garage sales, you watch your pennies. And then prudence. Prudence is the most difficult thing because when you save money, you want to invest it productively. So putting it into a bank that's yielding 1% isn't going to do it. You've got to take some risk. So you invest prudently in your own business, if that's possible. That tends to be high risk. Or you invest in other people's successful businesses, and that's what the stock market is. And that's my specialty. I have copies of my newsletter, by the way, if anybody's interested to see how I operate and how I'm very conservative in my investment strategy, but we've done very well over the years because we're prudent. We're prudent. I can tell you that most investors run into problems at one time or another, especially doctors and dentists and professional attorneys and so on. They're always seeking the fast buck. They're always looking for these high speculations that can double and triple your money. And that's what you want, we give it to you, but you don't necessarily win doing that. You need to take a more conservative approach. Prudence. Prudence is a really hard principle to learn. I do a conference every year called Freedom Fest, and last year we had Kevin O'Leary of Shark Tank, and he debated John Mackey. Well, that was a fun debate about capitalism. And we have Steve Forbes and John Mackey as our co-ambassadors. We've been doing this for about 10 years. We have a lot of fun. I'm meeting tomorrow with Larry Arnn, hoping to convince him to come and give a keynote speech. We've had William Shatner as keynote speaker. We get big name speakers. Shatner came and spoke. Fantastic speech. I arm wrestled with him and lost in 86. Yeah, he was tough. He was tough. And we had George Foreman the year before. George Foreman was very good. He says, please don't ask me any questions about politics. I said, okay. But he took questions from the audience. This one lady said, so tell me, what do you think of Black Lives Matter? Political question. How is he going to answer? Here's what George Foreman said. He said, you know, I grew up dirt poor. I had nothing. And I became the heavyweight champion of the world. Is this a great country or what? Did he answer her question? Yes, he did. That was pretty good. I'll never forget that moment. It was total silence and then a burst of applause. It was really, really something. And then in 2015, the beginning of the campaign, we had, yes, Donald J. Trump. And half the audience gave him a standing ovation. The other half sat on their hands. A very divisive person. But it made a big difference for Freedom Fest and his campaign. His numbers increased because he was on TV all day long at our conference. That was pretty cool in 2015. 7/11 in 2015. It's a lucky day. So here's our keynote speaker for this year. So you can guess who this is. Jordan Peterson. This man is electrifying. I was talking to a guy last night who calls Jordan Peterson the John the Baptist of today. Yeah, and he says, before he goes to bed, he turns on YouTube and listens to a Jordan Peterson. And when he wakes up in the morning, it's like a prayer. He says, I thought that was pretty crazy. But anyway, Freedom Fest, we bring in big name speakers. We pay a lot for these people to come, but we get a big turnout. We'll have 3,000 people there to hear him speak. And students love this guy. Did you know that suicide rates are skyrocketing among young men today for a variety of reasons that he talks about? And people are, a lot of young people, especially men, are holding on to things that he's preaching. So we have them for a 1-hour speech and Q&A. We have a 1-hour luncheon where you can meet people, and then 100 lucky students will meet with Jordan Peterson in the afternoon. So we're not sure how we're going to divide that, but we have student discounts and so on. Everybody pays, nobody comes for free. We don't do a free conference, even for students. So it's like $149 or something like that for students. It's a subsidized rate, but you do have to pay something. Why? A, accountability. NW, we help you out if you need it, but it's a fun event. And the other thing that's cool is those dates, July 13th to the 16th. Turns out to be the exact same dates as the Democratic National Convention. So while the socialists are all going to be meeting in Milwaukee, the rest of us are having a big party in Vegas. So which would you rather be at? I don't know if you'd want to run in July to Vegas, but...
It still beats Milwaukee.
It still beats Milwaukee, okay. Anyway, I've talked about a lot of things. I think I've given some good answers how to deal with the socialist challenge. So it's my hope that you can use some of this material here, especially when you can quote Jack London, who was a socialist, saying from each according to his ability to each according to his deeds makes so much more sense. And the idea of democratic capitalism, if you can say, listen, this is so much better because you're sharing the wealth, not the poverty. And it really, you're addressing the very issues that the democratic socialists raise about inequality and that sort of thing. So thank you all very much. I did want, if Vince, you can pass this around. This is my one-page advertisement for my book, The Making of Modern Economics, which I promote as the book that the new socialists fear the most. So a lot of this stuff is in there. And why do they fear this book the most? Because it's a textbook for students. And it's the students that we want to reach, because that's where the socialists are